Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert, an award-winning daily live show from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments of the live feed. And if you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. During the live session, we'll be running a poll, so do engage with it, and at the end, I'll read the results. So hey everyone, my name is Nana Parry. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Tectonic, and they do hyper-targeted customer research for B2B firms. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about scaling your startup. And what that means is, how can I help get you in a position where you actually know when to scale, but also how do I help you understand some of the pitfalls that could happen if you choose to scale too early? So I'm going to introduce myself in terms of how I actually started from an entrepreneurship background and tell you my journey and see if you can get anything from that. So I don't promise to be as entertaining or revealing as the Oprah interview yesterday, but I will definitely try my best. So in terms of myself, I used to work in corporate, so for IT companies predominantly, and I realized after making them quite a bit of money, I thought maybe I should branch out and do it myself. But actually, way before that, back when I was 13 years old, was when I first ventured into entrepreneurship. Even though at the time I didn't know it was called entrepreneurship or starting a business, but I used to have birthday parties and charge people to come to my birthday parties, including my brother, my sister. They're still not happy about it today. But I guess the point is that at the time I realized, okay, maybe I could provide something of value here. And if it's a value, then people would pay for it. And being, 13 years old, being able to get all the money for the year for my bus pass, the music I wanted to buy was really awesome. But going forward, many years after that, I kind of knew that I wanted to start a business, mainly from a freedom perspective. And I had a lot of harebrained ideas that didn't work out. But I did start a music startup, which helped musicians and music lovers find fans using data. And I raised some angel investment for that. Had never raised investment before, but learned that process, and got to a good number of users. And then all this Cambridge Analytica stuff happened, which I'm sure you'll remember, and actually lost a bunch of users. Had to tell the investors that we're going to shut down the business. So that wasn't fun at all. But in the process of that, I had already given away quite a lot of equity in my business. And I knew that I needed to find another way to make money, to make sure that we weren't, running out of cash. So very strangely, I used to live in Copenhagen in Denmark, and I had a friend from Morocco who invited me to come and visit. So I went to Morocco, went to Casablanca, landed in the airport, and for whatever reason, they took my passport and my driver's license, and I couldn't get out of the airport. I didn't know where they were, and so actually, there was another person in a very similar situation, and we ended up speaking and connecting and talking. And he ended up being the CEO of an investment bank, and actually wanted to move into a digital space. So based on my ability to connect with him, understand what his needs were, we exchanged numbers, and over a little bit of time, he flew to London and was like, right, I want to start this digital business and I need you to help me. I didn't have a team at the time, had to kind of get a team together. But I guess the point is, having that there's a position where you can actually sell something before you have a product. And if you do that, that actually means that you're really focusing on customer needs. Fast forward a little bit later, we started to grow the company, but I wasn't very experienced at running kind of an agency type business. And what I realized was that we had, 80, 70% of our revenue coming from one client and not so much, not from many others. So I had to make some tough decisions, but also realized the real value of our business was actually helping companies understand how they should build their products in terms of what the customer needs are. So we pivoted our business to Tectonic to focus on helping people, helping businesses understand the needs of their customers. So going on from that, I'd like to tell you a few things that really helped me from an advice perspective. Number one, as I kind of mentioned before, being customer focused, not product focused. If you really start to understand and really deeply know the problems that the customer has, the needs that they have, why they're doing what they're doing, if you can intimately understand those things, then you will definitely be in a position to provide really strong products for your customers and really strong solutions. Especially as a freelancer, when it's just one, maybe two of you, it's really important that you do spend time to build those relationships, because often they can be the bedrock of actually launching your business further. Secondly, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So this is a really good piece of advice that I got from a startup mentor. And sometimes we can get bought into the sensationalism of, I must grow aggressively, I must have a certain number of people in my business. And actually, it's not about being short term, it's about really thinking long term and recognizing that the journey is going to be long. and it is going to be difficult and up and down. So it being a marathon, not a sprint, really helped me from a mindset perspective. Thirdly, use real data to make decisions. And sometimes, especially as small businesses, we can think that data means, I have to have this, dashboard, and I have to have all these metrics coming through. And yes, that's all great. But actually, data can be as simple as you recording a conversation, having notes on a conversation that you had with 10 of your customers, and actually understanding and trying to find if there's a theme in terms of the problems they're experiencing today or the ways in which they want to grow. So that can be data, and using data to make real decisions, using real data to make decisions can really help forward your business on, scale your business. Number 4, resilience alongside support. So this is arguably one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, last 12 months for businesses, especially small businesses, there's been. And, it hasn't been a walk in the park by any means. But one of the great things about us is that we really tied together, and we really try and solve problems for ourselves and for our people. But we can't pretend that we can do it alone, because anyone that says they're self-made, for example, is just not telling the truth. We all need people, we all need help to do it. Even Jeff Bezos got 250,000 pounds from his parents to start Amazon. Obviously, he turned that into billions, but he had some help. And my help is generally 3 things. It's having a coach, a mentor, and a therapist. So those 3 things together really help me from a mental perspective, from an execution perspective, and from a life perspective, to make sure that I have the resilience to continue the business and grow as much as possible. And finally, having a base understanding of the key metrics. So obviously, QuickBooks being very accounting focused. As a small business, even though we may not be accountants ourselves, it is really important to understand some of these key things, such as cash flow and what that means when you make a specific decision. Or if you are a freelancer and you're delivering a website, if you're 2 weeks late, or if the customer is taking time with their feedback, then actually it has an impact on cash flow. Other metrics such as customer, your acquisition costs, how much it actually costs you to acquire a customer. These are things that you really need to understand, because actually being able to put yourself in a position to scale is very much dependent on having the financials understood. So those are some of the things to kind of help you from a perspective of getting to a point where you can scale. But actually, what about when you're there? How do you actually know you're ready to scale? Well, the first thing is you can't rush it, right? And cash flow, again, talking about the financial metrics, you need to be in a position where you're financially stable so that you don't try and rush the scaling process. Because if you do, you're just kind of setting yourself up to fail. So having those financial metrics is very important. But also you want to have metrics to track. You're going to have to make sure that when you are performing and when you are not. So you actually know what adjustments you might need to make to be in a position to further scale. Having a clear understanding of the problem that you're solving and who you're solving it for, and the value that you provide. What you don't want to be doing is trying to figure out what those things are when you're in a scaling mindset, because what that does, it eats up cash, it eats up time, and actually the level of experimentation that you should be doing in the early stages will really help when it is time for you to scale, because you can be really laser focused on the customer that you're solving for. Another one is clear roles and responsibilities. So actually making sure that those, whether it's yourself or your teams, actually have very clear roles and responsibilities, and they know when they are performing and when they are not. And also standard operating procedures. So these are things in your business where you can say, okay, this is exactly how things need to go from a process perspective, from the email that gets sent out, the follow-up email, when you receive certain documentation, how you collect feedback from your customers, whether you're a digital or physical product. Actually understanding these things and having them operating well can actually make sure the scaling process is a lot smoother. So these are some of the things that I hope you got some value from in terms of my own journey. I'm not here thinking that I've got it all figured out, because I definitely don't. making mistakes all the time, as we all are. But I guess the main point, the thing that I probably want to stress out of everything, is that the resilience and the support to actually make what we want to happen, recognizing it's not just us, and also recognizing that, you know, it is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Those are really the core things that really helped me from a scaling perspective. So hopefully you found that that useful. So yeah, we're going to go into some questions now. So thank you very much for listening. We've got a question from Filiberto from Instagram. And what has been the most exciting journey of growth in your career? That's a really, really good question. The most exciting is probably actually starting to work with members of the team and watching them grow. So when we started the company, as I kind of mentioned, it was almost by accident. And, you know, kind of cobbling people together to actually create something of value is exciting in itself, but actually watching us grow as a team, and, you know, even when the difficult decisions are having to be made, people really banding together, people being really understanding about what's going on. I would say that, you know, in terms of excitement, just watching, you know, myself grow as an individual, from a resilience perspective, from a skills perspective, but also watching members of the team, you know, just absorb information and actually take things on themselves to own it and take that responsibility, has probably been the most exciting thing for me to see. You know, I like to help people. I think one of the reasons Tectonic exists is because, you know, we want to help people and help businesses grow. So I think, yeah, that's probably the most exciting part for me. There's many exciting things about the journey, but I would probably say that is the most exciting. Thank you very much for your question. Then we've got Cleo from Twitter. Says, morning, Nana. Which departments and employees bear the role of leading the charge of growth? Can it be clearly defined? Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So I think there's two parts to it. I think the first part is it has to come from a leadership perspective, even though it can be informed by, you know, other members of the team or other employees that you have. So my personal way of doing this is not to just say, you know, this is the direction of the company, let's just all go and everyone, you know, deal with it. You know, being in a position when you are the leader of the organization, it can be very easy to be blindsided or to be actually blind to some of the things going on in the market or in the organization, when those who are actually executing the projects or dealing with the client firsthand most of the time might have the key information that you need. So my view on it is to actually get data from your customers, get data from your teams, get data from the market, and actually use that to inform the growth strategy of your company. However, it is up to leadership, whether it's the CEO or the director, to actually be the person that is accountable for ensuring that that growth happens. Because if you don't have clear roles and responsibilities, it is very difficult to know what you might be needing to do at any one time. However, it's also important that every individual in the team, when it comes to their roles and responsibilities and their metrics, they also have clear lineage to the growth metrics, to what it is, to how their role contributes to the goal of the business. So I would say that it's the communication has to come from the leadership, but actually absorbing that information has to come from many different places for it to be a strategy that can actually be executed on. So hopefully that answers your question. We've got another question from Marianne from Facebook Messenger. Good morning. You mentioned having a coach and a mentor. What are the different things they can support and help with? Sure, yeah. So I talked about having a coach, a mentor, and a therapist. So from a coaching perspective, I have a really, really amazing coach, and she really helps me understand, okay, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? You know, sometimes we can get into this this pattern of just kind of, you know, running on the hamster wheel, but actually it's a bit of a check back, because as small business owners, we can be very, very busy and we can be solving lots of different problems. But actually it's to take a step back and say, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing? What do I actually want to achieve? And are the things that I'm doing contributing to that? And also sometimes I can have a habit of, you know, because I like to help people and I want to, you know, do what I can. Sometimes I can put the goals of others before my own. And there is a balance, right? So there's this check-in that a coach can help with to really help you understand how you're achieving your goals. From a mentorship perspective, it's very much business mentorship. So someone who has seen, you know, a lot of things that I haven't seen yet, I can take issues to, I can take problems to, and we can solutionize those things together. So I'm very, very fortunate to have you know, one in particular, very experienced mentor, but also having other mentors who, depending on the situation, I can actually take that to them. And this goes back to the whole, you know, we don't do it alone, right? So from a mentorship perspective, it's really how can I get advice and feedback on the execution of my business in particular. And the therapist is really, you know, to ground me in terms of, you know, my mental health. It's especially this year, it's so important to put that at the forefront, and actually investing in having a therapist alongside, you know, a coach, and having mentorship has really, really helped ground me in a lot of ways. So I would, you know, I know it's not sometimes easy to find a coach, therapist, and mentor, but I would really deeply encourage it to help you with your goals. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you very much. Got a question from Pilvi. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Hello, Nana. One of the biggest decisions in scaling our business has been what business activities and operations to outsource and what to keep in-house. Do you have any advice? Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think one of the things that helps with that framing of whether you actually take something to, you know, externally or keep it in-house is really understanding what is your core value proposition. So what is it that you are selling that is core to your business, and what do you need to have in place to deliver that? So for example, if you are making burgers, right? And actually, you know, your skill set, the thing that people are buying from you is the actual taste and texture of the burgers that you're creating. You know, just because you are creating the burger doesn't mean that you have to make the bun from scratch. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to, ferment the cheese overnight and all this kind of stuff. So it's really understanding, you know, the reason as into why people are coming to you, using that as the core, and that should be within your business. That has to be something that you can control. And then you can start to say, okay, even if you draw a circle, literally draw a circle on a piece of paper and say, okay, this is the value and these are the elements of my business that contribute to that value proposition. Then okay, there's going to be a bunch of stuff left outside, and you can decide based on the stage you are at with your business, or you know, your preferences in terms of how aligned it needs to be, the particular service that you're thinking about outsourcing needs to be for your value proposition to work. You can decide whether you put those in the circle or leave them out of the circle. Obviously, there are other things involved, such as the actual cost of, you know, outsourcing. It should be cheaper than you doing it internally. And by cheaper, we have to take into account that if you're not doing it internally, then you are saving time. Time is money. So you have to do those calculations as well to see if it's actually worth it. But sometimes, even if it is more expensive, for focus reasons, it might just make sense for you to outsource a particular part of your business so you can focus on the core value that you are providing to your customers. So that's kind of how I would start to make those decisions. As long as you're very, very clear and you have that ratification and that confirmation from your customers that, okay, this is why they're buying from you, then, you know, outsourcing other things can make the decision much easier in terms of what you outsource. Hopefully that answers your question as well. We got another question from Erica from Instagram. Are there any books you suggest for learning about scalability? Yeah, definitely. I've got a couple of books that are really good. I don't remember the authors, unfortunately, but I remember the titles. So there's one called Zero to Sold, which is a really good, literally from initial idea to selling your business, especially if you're bootstrapping, as a small business would often do. By bootstrapping, I mean, you know, finding ways to get money from your customers, investing it back into the company, and then building from there rather than getting significant external investment. Zero to One is a really, really great book. Zero to Sold is a really great book to kind of help you step by step that process. Another really good book is called Running Lean, iterating Plan A, and that can be actually found by PDF online. And basically, that is very much again a kind of step by step from, okay, this is the point where you should be thinking about scaling. Don't even think about scaling your business until you've understood these things, and then it gives you a bit of a playbook in terms of scaling. So that one's called Running Lean. I'm sure there are others. Actually, I really like a book called Rework by the founder of Basecamp. And it's a really, really interesting story about how they really debunk a lot of the things that we get from Silicon Valley when it comes to, this big kind of big idea that you have to, IPO. Actually, you can run a really good multi-million pound business if you want to, by doing certain things, at a base level. So I'd also recommend Rework as well from the founder of Basecamp. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question as well. Got another question from Demetrio from Twitter. So, hey Nana, in your experience, what are some of the mistakes that startups make that spells doom for their growth? Yeah, really good question. I mean, there's so many. So I'll try and pick out the ones that I think are really, really pertinent. I think number one is we have to recognize that as small businesses, it is, very difficult to be in a position where you can be profitable and you can get to a position to scale. But the thing that makes it even more difficult is if we're actually not sure about the market need, we're actually not sure, 100% sure, like really feel it, not just from data, but in our hearts as well, that I am solving this problem for this reason, for this customer. And when you start to scale, kind of, as I kind of mentioned before, if you start thinking about scaling too early, without having that context and really being able to understand that, it can become really difficult. So I think that's one mistake. People effectively thinking they know that, okay, this is my customer, this is how I just need to double down on this group, and actually not having the data to back that up. I think a second thing is a team perspective. Actually sometimes in the early stage versus when you're scaling, the skill set of the team needs to change, or the team actually needs to change. And that is something that can be very difficult when you are a business owner, when you've worked with people for maybe a number of years and they've helped you come to a point where actually, this is in a position to scale. Maybe they're not necessarily the right people to scale the bit, to be part of the team that actually scales the business. So you'll find very often that these private equity firms who purchase businesses, they'll look at management, they'll say, great, you've taken this to a point where this can be super valuable, and for us to take it even further, but actually we need people with experience scaling. So sometimes one of the mistakes businesses make is that they assume that the same skill set to start the business is the same skill set required to scale the business. So I think that's a really a mistake, and I think that comes into the your hiring strategy and how you communicate with your team as well. And I think finally it's the cash flow piece, not really understanding how cash flow works in your business and how to maximize cash flow in your business, I think is really, really, really key. And people often, if you don't have a good financial person with you to help you understand the impact of your decisions, it can also be really, really difficult. So like I said, there's loads of things, but I would say, in terms of top three, those are the ones that I would bring to the forefront. Cool, thank you. So Alexander from Facebook Messenger, what have you found is the best way to get feedback from customers? I'm at the start of my journey with my business. Thank you very much, a really good question. So one of the best ways, and often it sounds very obvious, but we often sometimes hide away from it, is actually just to have a conversation with them. Just as at a starting point, we could talk about all these tools you could use and all these analysis methods you could use. But actually, if you're at the start of your business, getting to the point where you actually just put yourself in front of the customer and have a conversation with them about them, their needs, their motivations, their problems, that would be the number one thing that cannot be replaced by any tool, you know. Obviously using, so coming on to the tools, if you do have a website, there is a tool, there's many of these tools, but one called Hotjar, which you can put on your, you know, in the back end of your website, and it actually starts to track where people are, you know, are potentially dropping off your site, or where they may be getting confused with messaging or language, and it actually records that. So you can actually see, you know, what people are, you know, how people are interacting with your product if it's a digital product. So I would say that, you know, at the starting point, these are some of the things that you could do. Obviously, there are many, many advanced methods, but if I'm starting out, best thing to do is not assume. Make sure you have assumptions written down that you want to make sure that you're sure whether they actually are real in the real world or not. And if they are, you know, you can make decisions based on that. But the information that you need to get is from talking to your customers. That's what I would highly recommend. Thank you very much. Okay, got a question from Naira from Twitter. Hi, Nana. My business partner and I have been wondering if we should increase our prices to deal with the current challenges. Is there any way we can do this without losing our customers? We do not have many strong competitors in the market we operate. Yeah, it's a really, really good question. So yes, you can actually increase your prices. However, having the understanding from your customers as to whether they're actually going to actually scale, to help you sell, is really important. But we're going to have to wrap up now. So if you'd like to message me on LinkedIn, I'll happily answer that question in more detail. So thank you very much for listening. So we're going to the poll results. And we asked you, have you ever sacrificed anything for your employees? And 100% of you answered no. So, I mean, sometimes we think that a sacrifice can be a really, really big thing. So, you know, even though it's 100% no, the likelihood is that in some ways, based on your own experiences, you have sacrificed something. I definitely know that I have, whether it's, you know, in terms of us having to take pay cuts during the coronavirus, all these kind of things. So yeah, really want to say it's part of the journey, and it's something that we all experience. So thank you for that. Okay, so thank you all for tuning in. If you want to get in contact with me, you can send me a message on LinkedIn under the name Nana Parry. And coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow is Andrew Block, founder of Andrew Block and Associates, and ranked as the most influential PR person on Twitter. Tune in tomorrow to get advice on how to create a buzz for your business. A reminder that if you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. So thank you very much. Really enjoyed answering your questions and speaking to you today, and have a really great day. Thank you very much.